Nora Ephron's final work is Lucky Guy. It stars Tom Hanks as the New York tabloid columnist Mike McAlery. McAlery is best known for his expose of the New York City police torture of Abner Louima in 1997. He won the Pulitzer Prize for that story just before his death from cancer at the age of 41. He was the epitome of a scrappy, big-city reporter and symbolized a unique moment in New York journalism. Lucky Guy has been nominated for 6 Tony Awards, including Best Play. Joining me now are 3 of the nominees, Tom Hanks, Courtney B. Vance, and George C. Wolfe. Also with us, Jacob Bernstein. He is Nora Ephron's son. He is working on a documentary about his mother called Everything is Copy. I am pleased to have them here at this table.
That's a great title there. Everything is copy.
Now, I have a question. Does that come from Nora's conversation with her mother on her deathbed?
Indeed. Her mother always said, you know, use it. And when her mother was on her deathbed, she said to her, take notes. And my mother did. And she wrote a piece called The Mink Coat, which was, I believe, in Esquire. And it was sort of about mourning and how her mother had become somebody who was, you know, not exactly a role model for her at a certain point. But, you know.
But said, take notes.
Take notes. She did.
Everything.
Yeah.
So how did this start? I mean, Nora wanted to do something about Mike, who she didn't really know.
Mm-hmm. So she read his obituary.
She read the obituary.
And said, this is a story I need to tell.
But was going to do it as an HBO thing?
She was going to do it as an HBO movie, and within weeks she had gone to meet with Alice McAlery, who was Mike McAlery's wife. She began to go and meet with. She did not. She really did not waste time with it, and the only reason that it sort of took as long as it did to gestate was because it was very hard to figure out how to make it work as a movie because the characters broke through the fourth wall, and now obviously we're seeing a little bit more of that. It means that they talk to the audience.
It freaks out everybody for some reason.
So now that's become slightly trendy with shows like House of Cards and whatnot, but then it really wasn't, and so it was tough to figure out how it was going to work. And then when Colin Callender, who was guiding its development at HBO, another Belportian, left, and he knew Mike McAlery. Their houses had been near each other. And he said, what if this wasn't a movie but a play? And within weeks she had written another draft.
But did somebody have to convince her of that, or she simply went back to her computer and said, let's see if I can make it into a play?
She had about 24 hours of, I don't know what you're talking about, and then she had written it in 2 weeks, which...
Yeah.
Before we talk about Mike and Lucky Guy, let me just, you obviously, did you know Mike yourself?
I did not.
Did not. Did you know Mike?
I did not, no.
Did you know Mike?
Did not.
You
didn't know him, and I didn't read him when I lived in the city.
Didn't really?
No, at the time, I think I refused to read either one of the tabloids because it was during their heyday, and between the outrage machine and the fact that my name might appear in bold lettering at some point, which would really ruin my day.
But Nora wrote for one of them too, as you remember.
Well, she wrote for the Post when it was the granddaddy of literature. You know,
before it was owned by Rupert Murdoch.
They always said I wrote for the Post, but not like the Post. It was the old Post.
In fact, it was trashy and fun then too. I mean, you know, when she wrote the piece on Dorothy Schiff, she said that the New York Post is a terrible newspaper, and the reason is Dorothy Schiff. She did a piece for Esquire right after she had left and sort of burned the bridge there. So. There you have it.
She told me at one point she was the young girl at the Post, and they kept sending her out to cover the Beatles when they arrived at the airport until she finally says, do I have to go out and cover the Beatles arriving at the airport? And again, I said, stop. You covered the Beatles when they arrived at the airport? I've gone back through the raw footage and tried to find her, and I asked her once, is that you? Did you ask, is that you saying, sing something? And she said, no, I don't think that was me. But I think that was her.
Before we talk about Lucky Guy again, so your relationship with Nora, because obviously you made movies together, but also the thing you and Rita did about Nick and Nora at the memorial services was like, I asked him, was that on tape somewhere? Because it was so great.
For some reason, we were invited to the table, the party, upon making Sleepless in Seattle. And look, working with Nora, you're at the absolute top of their game. Right. But when you're invited to have dinner with Nora with a group of other people, well, you're on a whole other plane of existence there. That can be very rare rarefied air if you are not up to the task of both listening and participating.
You have to know the references are about.
Oh, you got to be smart. And if you're not smart, you have to be honest and say, well, I don't know what that is. But if you say that, you get much more credit than pretending you know what the hell they're talking about.
You know, we did the reading about a year and a half ago, and that was my first time meeting her. She sent everyone a beautiful note, and that impressed me, a handwritten note. So
Bet you kept it.
Oh, you know, it's framed.
Oh, yeah.
Now, did you know, Norm?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
No, but this is a great story, I think, and help me if I'm wrong on this, in where when the idea of working with you, she came back to see Nick, and she said, this guy's amazing. Was that you, George?
Well, yes, it was, man.
Am I misplacing the story and identifying you as part of the story and not? I think this was when they were turning it in from something into the play.
Well, she'd been working on the play for a while, and she and I started working together September of 2011. Would that be correct? And she would come to my house, and we'd go through and I'd give her tons and tons and tons of notes. And literally, it's just like with the draft. She'd be back the next week with a new draft. And it was the ferocity and the brain. The one thing that was so, when I got a draft, and I loved it because it was, the energy was so raw and so real. And then I ended up bumping to her the night that I said I was going to work with her on it at a movie. And she came over to me and she said, come on, let's take a picture together. This is going to be the first of many pictures we're going to take together. Oh. And that was, you know, and that was just at the beginning of our process of
working
together.
What was her genius, Tom?
I think that she always saw the signposts of human behavior that marked out the era in which we lived. The two movies that we did, Sleepless in Seattle, which was all about that odd chance of hearing somebody on talk radio, was one example of it. But when she sent me You've Got Mail, which was literally about the romance, the anonymous romance that can start up when you just have an email sent to you by someone you don't know, and you fall in love with the person by way of the specialness of that email, I said to her, well, this is kind of like fantastic, but because it's so current, it's about today. She says, yes, it is about today, but if we don't make it within the next 5 minutes, something will come up that will replace email. So the thing that always got me about her is that she would ask the question around the dinner table that would be about politics, but she would ask the question that is about the behavior, about how we as a society are interacting in a way that had never been done before. And I think in some ways the McAlery aspect of it captures that time.
Capture a time
when for 24 hours, whoever cracked that story owned the story, and they defined the story.
And it was a time in New York when I was here.
There's a great reference in the play where McAlery, Tom is arguing with his editor, and he says, "No, I'm writing it for tomorrow." Right. And it's just this most astonishing line.
One last thing about Nora before we'll come back to her, but was it hard for you to write that piece about the last several days?
Yes, certainly. I mean, there were certainly moments where I thought, why am I doing this? But I did it over the course of a few weeks, and I would kind of spend an hour and a half every day kind of chugging along on it, and then at a certain point it was there. I didn't do it in you know, sometimes you really sit down and you're able to write something in one or two, you know, goes. I couldn't have done that with this. I have
with your parents, if you can't write, there's a problem.
Yeah, what a burden. Jeez, I don't wish that on anybody.
So now Mike McAlery. So what was important for you, Tom, to capture about this guy?
I did not have it until I heard this story, which was recently. I understood, okay, he's a competitive guy. I understand that there's that desperation to be a reporter, which is why he came to the city. He wanted, and as he said in this very chair at some point, writing a column, everything else is second place compared to writing. I got that, but there was some aspect of the me I am special and I want everybody to know it. Part of Mike that I didn't understand until I heard this story that Jim Dwyer told, in which he was in Elaine's when Governor Jerry Brown was in there as well. He had just broken up with Linda Ronstadt, and someone told this to Mike McAlery. He went and got a roll of quarters from the cashier, went over to the jukebox, and played Linda Ronstadt's "You're No Good" 48 straight times. Now, oddly enough, I can relate to that. I understand doing that much more than I understand.
You had your guy there.
Yes, I said, I know that guy saying, I'm just going to sit back here and watch the back of that dude's head as he hears, "You're No Good" 48 straight times.
So much better.
That's a brand of theater there.
So you had the guy. Now, was there an
issue?
issue for you or George for you in a sense, because Tom has this thing, Mr. Likeable too, you know, and there was a part, I mean, you know, projection in terms of stimulation. Was there a part of you said, we got to show that at times Mike was not that likable, you know, and here's a guy that they see, an audience sees, even though he's been in so many different parts and played so many different roles and has come out of the roles in which you're looking at the character, not Tom Hanks. But was that a issue at all?
No, because I think what's thrilling about that, because Tom, you know, in addition to being, you know, an incredibly brilliant and skilled actor, it's, you know, we would talk.
I just looked at the camera when you said that. I didn't want to
yeah, and it's the charm. There is a charm equation. There's an appeal. So I knew an audience would follow. An audience is going to follow him, just like people followed Mike McAlery. They adored him. People adored him or hated him, but they would follow him. And you want people to go on the journey. I don't think a character has to be likable. I think a character has to be real. If you can find a character who is real, then you can find yourself inside of it. To me, because ultimately what I think Lucky Guy is about is a guy who goes from the journey of trading his ambition in for grace. After life happens to him, he becomes a better person.
Your character, Hap, has a central role here in this, the relationship between the two.
The whole idea of the editor and the writer and how it shifts. Our two characters were very, very close. Yeah. But as he ascended and need each other. I mean, he ended up sleeping on my couch for days at a time. Yeah. But the fact that they needed each other so much, and but as he rose, his star rose, then our relationship started to shift. And what that did to the relationship, we both knew that we helped each other, but he became
the velocity of one ascension.
He became a superstar.
Yeah.
Well, the raw materials that McAlery provided was great stuff, but it had to go through the sieve and the processing of somebody like Hap Hairston in order to make it the palatable or in some ways cohesive, as a matter of fact.
Yes,
coherent.
He was not Jimmy Breslin. I mean, it did not flow out of him naturally. I think one of the things in terms of the larger question of my mother, it sort of flowed out of her naturally. I mean, she could write very fast, and it did not have to be edited. And it was a sort of amazing thing about her that she would sit down at the computer at 10 in the morning and she would be done at 11.
Yes, I'd say wow.
Yeah. McAlery,
even George would say wow.
Yeah, exactly.
McAlery wasn't like that, and but he was dogged, and that served him
There's
well.
also the idea of Breslin, because some people have questioned whether Mike wanted to be Breslin. That's a theme that runs throughout this, right?
I think he wanted to have the place that Breslin had in the cultural eye. He wanted to be the guy.
Columnist.
He wanted people to say, "Did you read McAlery today?"
Exactly.
And they didn't always have reason to say that, but they always did about Breslin. And I think also the two Hamills, Dennis and Pete. I think those were they were guys who, when you say, "Did you hear what is it?" But McAlery, I think, was spotty in that regard. But I think what he wanted more than he would have loved to have gotten on the subway and seen everybody turn to page 3 of the Daily News when he was on page 3 of the Daily News.
It's like walking down through the streets of New York.
That's what he wanted.
And you hear your name as you pass,
Exactly.
So the time. Help me understand the time that this all took place. You think of the idea of tabloid being at its zenith, and everybody wanted to see, and there was a lot about murder. Yep. There was a lot about police. There was a lot about sensationalizing everything.
Well, it was a time where the city was in decay, but as Hap Harrison's character says, you know, crime was on the rise, the crack epidemic, the city was divided. It was a great time to be in the tabloid business because every day there's a story. There's a headless body in the topless bar. Right. There's also this. The city is very ferocious, and so that therefore it's a perfect landscape for people with pure ambition.
Yes, and it wasn't owned by Russian oligarchs who didn't live here. I mean, it was people who were living here and creating here and committing crimes here and all of that stuff. So they had material, and you could afford to live here and be a reporter then.
What do you like best about it?
About the play?
Yeah, the play your mother wrote.
I think she got something about boys with this play in some way. Yes, I mean, I think she was. She made these movies that were about men and women, but they were about men and women together. This play is fundamentally about men, and she was attracted to this world. She was attracted to these men, truthfully, and she was. You know, my mother always said that she never thought she would marry anybody other than a writer, and in fact, she got married 3 times, and they were all writers. So.
Well, she once said to me, she said, "What's better than hanging out with the boys in the bar?" Wow. There's nothing better. There's nothing more fun. There's nothing more fun. And she, and I'm sure she was there having fun, but it was also, that language. I think the way the language crackles in this play is dazzling. It's just dazzling.
You know, it's about guys, it's about people with information. And it's like that sitting around a table and say, I have got to tell you this thing I got. You're not going to believe what I got. And it's just, it's better than a campfire.
Yeah, it is that notion. And it still happens, but not in newspapers, in which friends that I know, they call up every morning, I haven't read the paper, and say, can you believe this? And that's what they did. Yeah. Something they had written or something they discovered about a character. All right, let's take a look at some clips, and then we'll talk more. This is first one's conversation between Tom and the editor, John Cotter. Here it is.
Everything in between is how you tell the story and who's telling the story. And what do they think is important and which order to put it in and where they're coming from.
Well, what about facts? We believe in facts. Don't we believe in facts with journalists, who, what, when, where? We write like the first draft of history in the voice of the people. If it wasn't for us, we'd be living in a dictatorship.
Yeah, you're making me sick. I may throw up. McAlery, I want you to try to wrap your thick skull around this philosophical point I am trying to make.
Oh, philosophical. Okay, f*** you.
Except for a few hardcore things, which, for want of a better word, we'll call facts. Like what time it was when the shot was fired and there's a guy alive or dead. Everything's a story. For example, what's your story? The story of McAlery.
I am a newspaper reporter, and I love my job. And I'm doing God's work. I'm serving the public. I'm telling people what happened yesterday. I'm telling them the facts. I'm rewarding the good guys, and I'm putting the bad guys away. And f*** you, Cotter, there is such a thing as facts. There, that's my story.
Your story is you're a kid with a bad case of Breslinitis. And you're probably never going to get over it.
Well, that's how you tell the story.
So go ahead. Now, watching that, it seemed slow.
Very slow, yes.
Early on in the
Early on.
Early on. So in other words, one of the things that between then and tonight. Rapid.
It's almost a crime that people our show goes on record and that it's reviewed as early in the process as it is, because that sounds like even sounds like a lackadaisical conversation. And now we have now invested so much in listening to the other people that we now are able to jump on these ideas, and so it does.
Is that a director saw that and said, I mean, what's happened? That's part of what you've done to this play.
Well, one of the things is that you want to capture the rhythm and the energy of the play. I tell the actors as a joke all the time, there are 2 pauses in this play and none of them are yours. And you know, because it's also sharp. It's sharp people who are out there and they're in competition with each other. As Jacob was saying, it's about boys. And anytime they're around the table, they're enjoying each other and competing with each other and listening to each other and not listening to each other.
I can top that.
I can top that, exactly. Are you really listening to the story? Are you waiting for the other person to finish so you can tell a better story?
But George did speed it up. I mean,
he did.
He's not going to take take credit for it, but he did. So.
The rapid.
And he was right to.
Yeah, I think it's the speed of competition is what it is.
Right.
And New York City.
And yes, definitely
The speed
at
has
the
to
time.
do. The speed of the dialogue has to do with the speed of competition, or the nature of competition.
And yes, it's like what you're seeing there between Mac and John Cotter it's a debate between the place where what a journalist does and what it's a debate between facts versus story, and it goes much faster now because it's got a spirit of competition.
And you've got a case of Brezonitis. Okay, here's a conversation between the two of you. Let's bring it in. Roll tape.
You owe me an apology.
Because I didn't keep your secret.
I told you because I was upset about it. I hated it.
Well, then why did you go?
They told me to go. I'm management. What was I supposed to do?
Oh, you can work anywhere.
I like it here. I like the Daily News. I even like being your editor.
You like telling people you created me. You like telling people if it wasn't for you, there would be no Mike McAlary.
There are days when you turn in your column, I have no idea what it's about.
You tell people you write my column.
Some days I do.
Well, I write my column. Some days you fix my column. And I am so grateful to you, Mr. Harrison. But newsflash, but that is your job. If it wasn't for you, I would still be
Mike McAlary.
writing a column. And some other guy would be editing it, and it would be just as big.
Tell me something out of curiosity. You're speaking to Wilsey?
Why wouldn't I be speaking to Wilsey? He didn't go to scab school.
They don't make the editor-in-chief go to scab school.
They didn't make you go. You didn't have to go. They can't fire you, Hap. Don't make me spell it out.
Are you saying I didn't have to go to scab school because I'm black?
Am I saying that? Yeah, I'm saying that.
You have no idea. I never got a break because of that. You have no idea how hard I had to work. How many white guys had to forget I'm black for me to be where I am.
And my heart is bleeding.
66.
Okay.
Charlie, we're talking faster now.
All right, George. Let's have him do the damn lines at the speed that it. Let's see it. Let's see it. Come on. You say it's gotten fast. I want to see
I want to
it.
see it now. Give us an audience.
Take off, Mike McAlary. Let's see your
You're giving
stuff.
yourself your own notes. I'm very happy about this.
Just let's see your stuff.
Tonight. We're doing I got to protect the pipes.
Yeah.
Got to protect the pipes.
George, if you had it to do, well, I mean, you can still play with it. Are you still playing with it? Are you still, tinkering with it?
Well, the thing which is, you build a form, and the actors are involved in the building of the form, and then at one point you have to release it because then the most thrilling moment for me working on a play is when your work almost becomes invisible. So it looks like it's all their choices. They're making all the decisions. And I think I saw the show maybe about the last time I saw it all the way through was a week ago, and it was, there were things where I would give notes. This is slow. This could be this, but it felt so completely and totally inhabited. It felt emotionally smart. It felt like they were driving the truck and they were turning it and parking it and moving it and making it zing and fly exactly the way they should. So it's thrilling when it's not yours anymore, it's theirs. And that's where I feel the show is. And the ensemble is just astonishing. They're so smart, and they've claimed this language in this world, and they're thrilling
What's
to
so
watch.
interesting about this, most of the characters you can go talk to.
Exactly.
Except for Mike McAlary and the author. But you can talk to them and get a sense of, as we did. Eddie Hayes is alive and well.
Yes.
And there's a
been to the
character.
show many times. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly. I'm sure. So what do you want us to know about McAlary? Because this is a guy, first of all, who was a star, who was in a terrible accident because he was drunk. I remember that night when we found that that had happened.
Yeah. And literally crawled back from the brink of death and reestablished himself as a man of letters. I would have to say this, is that there's a line in the play that Mike McAlary viewed himself as... He had a sweet fantasy about what he did. And it is a fantasy, but it does overtake the pessimism at the end of the day, that he was a knight and that he righted wrongs. And he righted wrongs. And at the end of the day, the journalists, the tabloid journalists, that's what they did. They saw injustice and they fought for the good guy. They saw corruption and they fought against the bad guy. I think that's what he set out to do from the moment that he decided to sit down at a typewriter and tell somebody else's story.
So Louima represented for him
Well, Louima is very interesting because the 4 or 5 columns that he wrote, first is definitely about Louima. Yeah. Then it's about the cop. Yeah. Who tortured Louima. Right. And then it's about the girlfriend of the cop that tortured Louima. So he gets in very, very quite deeply. But yes, it was as Alice says, you have made your living fighting the good fight for these people. You can't walk away from it now. And when he was great, and he wasn't always great. I mean, even as Nora said, I asked, did you read all this? No, not really. I said, was he a great writer? She said, sometimes. You know, when he was in the wheelhouse, man, in this case, you couldn't touch it. And going back and reading those Louima stories now, if it was a story that was, if you saw this thing today, it literally ripped right out of today's headlines. It would be a worldwide sensation of what they did to Abner Louima.
One of the things that was really interesting as we started working on the play, because he was taken to Coney Island Hospital, and we were told that a lot of times that the cops take them there because they want to completely, totally bury the story. And a nurse there called it in, and then someone then called him, and McAlery and went out and interviewed him. And had that not have happened,
he was in bad shape himself by that time.
Exactly.
The nurse hadn't called. That's what you're saying.
No, the nurse did call in. If McAlery didn't do that story could have been completely swept up,
and it wasn't a story he wanted to do tomorrow or the next day. He wanted to do it right then.
Absolutely.
At least that's
absolutely.
What it was.
Exactly.
It had to go do this now.
And there's one point in the play where he says you feel for the most of the time very early on, and then there's another, and then in the Abner Louima scene when Abner's telling the story, he stops the scene and he says, take your time. And it's a transformation, I think, in a very simple way of him as a reporter. It was no longer about getting what's good, which is going to boost his personality. It was about doing what is right and what is correct and what is necessary. And it's a stunning moment in writing. And
he is not a universally well-liked man. I've talked to people just said I didn't care for him at all. But I've heard others like Ethan Sachs and Corky Shamosko of the Daily News just said, I was one of his acolytes. He was, you know, I caught him at the tail end, and I just wanted to be, a reporter just like he was.
Okay, here's another scene in which involved his wife. Take a look.
Gentlemen, the former Alice Argento of North Massapequa.
Yes, not to be confused with Massapequa.
I was crazy about McAlery's wife.
Michael and I first met in college.
Syracuse.
At a mixer.
She caused me to spill my drink.
Accidentally.
So I said...
He had the nerve to tell me I had to buy him another one, which I did. And then the rest of the night we laughed and we talked.
Oh, we had a great time.
And we agreed to meet a week later.
On an official date.
So I showed up looking really good.
Here's the thing. There was this sophomore named Lisa.
Here's the thing. He was dancing with another girl. I grabbed my coat, very dramatic, and I walked off.
Nice view. I followed.
We've been together ever since.
My wife can recite all the stops on the Long Island Railroad in a conductor's voice. Oh, what?
She could. She absolutely could.
Come on, dude.
I don't want to do it.
Come on, do it. I love it when you say, run, come on.
Come on, do it.
The 701 to Babylon, now departing on track 16, Woodside, Jamaica, St. Albans, Lynbrook, Rockville, St. Baldwin, Freeport, Merrick, Belmore, Wantagh, Seaford, Massapequa, Park, Amityville, Copic, Lindenhurst, and Babylon.
Yes! Yes!
Whoa, wait a minute. Hey, babe, what about Ronkonkoma?
Not on the Babylon line.
Sweetheart, honey bun, love of my life. Come on.
Ronkonkoma!
Oh, beautiful!
That is beautiful.
I want to introduce you now via tape a couple of people that you have seen here. One is Eddie Hayes, who's also a Bellportian, who was Mike McAlery's friend, who brought him out to Bellport. This is him talking about that first meeting. Here it is.
I met him because another guy brought him out to look at this house, and he couldn't possibly afford the house, and I told him that. He calls me up the next day in the middle of a riot in Brooklyn.
Now, you were his lawyer then, or you?
No, nothing to do with it.
You get a call from me.
Right. He calls me up the next day. He's in a riot in Brooklyn. I said, get out of there, Michael. You're going to get hurt. He says, I'm going to be on the front page tomorrow, and he was. He came up to see me. I told him to come see me. He said, I said to Mike, do you still want to buy the house? He says, I do. I said, you don't have the money, but I'll lend you $200,000. Right? Now, how are you going to pay me back? He says, that's your problem. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, from now on, I heard about you. You're going to be my lawyer. You're going to figure out a way for me to pay you back.
Right.
I said, with an attitude like that, we'll think of something.
That's a great story.
That's a great story, and it's not far away from the dramatized version of what we put together.
Exactly. If you hear that story, you say, yeah, that fits.
Yeah, it totally fits.
Exactly.
Totally fits, yeah.
All right, we want to close here as we talk about this. This is Nora talking about her love for journalism. Take a look at this.
Journalism was something that I was as deeply in love with as anything I've ever been in love with. It was so romantic. It was so, you know, I had grown up not seeing the great movies because they weren't re-showing them on television when I was a kid yet. But the aura of the front page, and even in Superman on television, Lois Lane and the Daily Planet, it looked like a great job, and it is the greatest job.
And it was. You liked the stories you covered. You liked the idea of doing it. You liked the process of doing it. You liked the people who did it.
I think it is a fantastic job. Now I kind of look back on it the way you look back on someone you were once in love with that you bump into and you think, what did I ever see in him?
Yes, I know.
But, you know, as you get a little wiser, and about the, you know, the pretensions of journalism when I was young, and still, you know, the pretensions to truth. I really did think that when you wrote a story, you were writing the truth.
She was going to tell it all. Holy smokes. There you go. Wow. Man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you. Great to have you here, too, Jacob. Pleasure. Lucky is at the Broadhurst Theater through July 3rd. Remember this, nominated for 6 Tony Awards, including Best Play. Back in a moment. Stay with us.